Welcome back. We are excited. Today we have Elisabeth White joining us. She is the CEO of Cornerstone Agility and author of soon-to-be best-selling People Do Change. It's the first comprehensive guide to human-centric change management and is due to be released on June 3rd. So welcome to the podcast, Elisabeth.
Welcome,
Hello,
Elizabeth.
thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. Do you mind just giving a quick bio for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Elisabeth White with Cornerstone Agility. I've been spending the last 15 plus years coaching agility, coaching lean agile, coaching leadership, and just have a passion for people. That's really why I'm here. And I discovered human-centric change management about a year and a half ago, fell in love with it, and decided I needed to write about it. And so that's why I'm here.
That's fantastic.
Perfect.
So, Elizabeth, why don't you tell us a kind of brief outline about your book and kind of what motivated you to go down that path? Because it's not an easy concept to write a book.
Yeah, absolutely. This one was honestly pretty easy for me to outline because change is something that we face within consulting all the time. We face it in every aspect of our life. Every day we get to make choices, and those choices ultimately make change or don't make change. And it's something that my clients face a lot. And so once I discovered human-centric change management, I really felt the need to bring a lot of thought leadership in one place in a very short, concise way. The book is intentionally small and quick to read, but I think change is something that we all face, and it's something that we need to be talking about. And I think there's a better way to do it. I think there's this misconception, especially in my industry, but probably just in a human experience perspective, that change is process and that like we go through a process of change, when in reality it's emotional. The journey is very emotional. It starts emotional, it ends emotional. And so if we lead with people and lead with addressing the emotion that we experience through change, I genuinely believe and have evidenced you get better results. And people are in a healthier state when you take them and their emotions serious on a change journey.
Oh, Elizabeth, that's excellent. A lot of times when in clients, at any level, I always try to emphasize that a company is more than the four walls, right? And that's hard, right? Because especially if the higher you go, more disconnected you are to people, right? I mean, you have a layer that you deal with all the time, but
Yep.
the soul and the spirit of a building or a company is more than the building, the four walls, right? So that's fantastic. And I'll have to tell you, as a technical person, I have a hard time. I have to be very conscious, aware that companies are people, right? Individuals.
Yes.
A goal to aim for is not just. And Liz will laugh because we always talk about processes, and we always consider processes things, but we
Yes.
really need to consider the people, right? Because if you want change, you need people involved and not being told what to do, but have them to be an active participant in that solution set, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And understanding that even through process, it is a human experience of going through the process and not losing sight of until we're all replaced by robots. I don't know when that day is coming, but until it arrives, we can't lose sight
Yeah,
of the capacity comes from people and people
exactly.
have experiences and not losing sight of it. Yeah.
Right, and unlike robots, right, where they all probably have one mission and one goal, right? They don't have any emotions from point A to point B.
Right.
We're talking
Right.
about a conglomeracy of individuals, and each one will have different fears and different emotional ups and downs, right? And how do you address that, right, along the way? How do you get everybody on the same page where people feel confident in the leadership to trust them, right? And
Yes.
someone like myself, and we've talked to other people from the military, that's one of the things that military people go through, right? How do you trust your leadership and how do you engage, right? So, really important what you're saying here, because again, without the people, there is no change in the process for good or for worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. Yeah. And you know, if people don't actually join the change journey, then
Mm-hmm.
what we're ultimately doing is accepting status quo And status quo is what destroys companies. It's just the truth. And it's a hard truth, but it is the truth of 2025. And I think it's so critical for leaders, organizations,
Yeah.
individuals, teams to understand we always have to be ready for change, but there is a better way to do it. There's
Yeah.
certainly a better way to do it.
I'm curious. You said you were introduced to this concept about a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
How have
yeah.
you used it since you've learned it? Oh, maybe you were using it before, it just didn't know what it was called. How have you used it in the companies you've contracted with?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say yes-ish. I think, with a background in lean agile and being a transformation and leadership coach for so long, and I am just a people person from a Strength Finders, Clifton Strengths perspective. Relator is my number one strength. I am a people person. It's just
Yeah.
what I excel at. So I do think I've always taken a people approach. I do think I've always been searching for that methodology or that process. And instead of just starting with the people and understanding, like, when people say, well, why do I have to change? That's a legit question that warrants and deserves an answer. We should answer why. Like, change for the sake of change is not healthy. And
Mhm.
so when people ask the question why, we should lead with that. We should lead with purpose. We should lead with understanding. And I would say that's probably the very first thing I took from human-centric change management is, before you ever expect anyone to walk the journey of change, there better be an understanding of why that path was put in front of them. Otherwise, they should never have to take one step. There should
Right.
be no expectation. And so that in itself, the first of the four components of human-centric change management, has completely changed the way I look at change. Because instead of trying to like put a change plan together and then figuring out which change process we're going to use, I kind of throw all of that to the side and say, first, let's understand why we're here, and then build everything around the people who are going to go on the journey.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that
I
makes
guess.
sense.
Go ahead, Liz.
No,
Sorry.
I was going to say, because a lot of times you'll be saying in an organization that, they change leadership and new leadership comes in, and then things, sometimes they just want to change just to change something because they're new in that role and that's what they want to do, new initiatives. And it's really creating that big why to educate everyone around them. We see this a lot. People will, within organizations, will say, well, we've always done it this way. And that like makes the hair on the back of our necks just stand up as soon as they say
Yeah.
that. What are some practical ways that leaders can build a culture that's more open to change when they have that mindset of, well, we've always done it this way?
I always lead with, if it's the way that we've always done it, then we're not interested in growth. So when you say that, that tells me you don't want to grow. So where you are today is where you would like to continue to be on your 3-5 year strategic journey. So you don't need strategy. You can throw all that out the window because you're happy right here.
Yeah.
You're going to stay right here. And when you get disrupted by a competitor or you get replaced by something
Hmm.
else in your
Which you will.
industry, you are happy with that. You are hoping and just waiting for replacement to arrive. And I think when leaders hear that, you're very quick to change your culture and your language, because lacking a growth mindset is accepting replacement. Most companies aren't working hard every day to be replaced. That's not the goal that they're going for. Companies who are spending months putting together really great strategic direction aren't doing it with the goal of staying where they are. And so when they say, well, it's the way that we've always done it, that becomes a red flag. And it says, that to me, when I work with my clients and with leaders, is that's the first signal to me that we need radical change. We need to consider many different change initiatives, and we need to stack rank them, and we need to prioritize them, but we probably need a substantial amount of change, because if this is the way we've always done it, then we probably stopped growing a long time ago, which means we are now ripe for disruption and ripe for replacement. And that should be scary. That should actually cause tinglies for people. Like, there should be a
Yeah.
fear factor that happens. And so that's usually how I lead is if we're saying that's the way we've always done it, then let's look at the clock and say, okay, so we've got what, 6 months left? And then we're gone? Like what's your timeline?
Yeah.
What's your end goal, right?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
really reality?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Yeah, I wonder, Elizabeth, if companies that have been in business for a long time, as you know, it gets harder and harder to change, right? Especially if they're from an old breed, right? So,
Yeah.
have you spoken with companies who are more entrepreneurial or new startups? Are they more embracing this kind of concept than a company that's been established for 100 years, for example?
Here's where I will say human-centric change management becomes critical because human nature is human nature, and human nature applies in an entrepreneurial startup that is 3 weeks old or 3 years old, all the way up to Fortune 500 organizations that have been here for a very, very long time. We like comfort, we like structure, we like routine, we like predictability, and we like those things as humans, whether we're in a startup or we're in a Fortune 500. So I would say it really is a 50-50 chance. Growth mindset is a choice, and
Yeah.
you have to actively choose it. I always tell people you need to choose it at least one day a week, and it doesn't have to be Monday, and it certainly doesn't have to be Friday, but at least one day a week you have to wake up and say, I will find the motivation to show up with a growth mindset. Because if you don't, change does become very hard. It's not something many of us naturally select.
Yeah.
And so it really is a 50-50 chance. Some of my favorite companies I've worked with didn't start with a growth mindset, but when you see that change happen, they're an unstoppable powerhouse. And
It's
so
infectious, right? It's infectious,
Yeah, you
Elizabeth,
get those
right?
small wins. You
Yeah.
see, it just snowballs.
Yeah, it's, those are the moments where I suddenly find myself back at the athletic club, like I can lift weights. It's like those moments, because you're like, if you see other people changing, it is infectious. But I would say it really is company agnostic or company neutral, because it's human nature, and it's how you show up as an individual. Are you showing up with a growth mindset, or are you showing up in your comfort zone? And your comfort zone is not where you want to be in the workplace.
Yeah,
You don't
it's
grow
very,
there, that's for
yeah.
sure.
But you're right. Nature of the beast. It's very easy to stay. You go in, do your job, get out, right?
Yeah.
And you really have to prove to them why the change is needed
Yes.
from a beneficial point of view, whether it's as an individual or for a company, right, for growth. And you have to show what that value is, right? And why do you value them? Why are you saying, we could add more, or we can add more to our world if we just did some changes. Again, small changes, not these big, as I said, home runs. We talked off the air, which is kind of leading me to my next, the four things I got out of your book, right, with that connection to my world, is empathy, right? We're talking about individuals, and that's where you got to start. Because if leadership dictates what changes, it's only going to last so long, right? At least until the next change of command, right? So,
Exactly.
Elizabeth, talk to us about the psychology about empathy and getting everyone going in that same direction.
Yeah, people have feelings. We're all individuals, and hopefully we're able to show up as our authentic self. But even if we show up as our authentic self, we have to be heard as our authentic self, and like that is the power of empathy, especially in change. Is if I show up and say, I'm really struggling to understand why we're being asked to change this, or you know what, we've been doing this for 10 years and it has been working fine. Why change what ain't broke?
Right.
People should be able to voice those concerns. We should be able to talk about it, and we should come from a place of listen to understand and not listen to react, and allow people to show vulnerability and show authentic self, and then congratulate people, because that's not easy. It's not easy to show up authentically, and it's not easy to show up and be vulnerable and say thank you. Say thank you so much for that perspective. You are providing clarity. you're letting me know that we've got some gaps that we need to address. If you're still lacking the why, we have to do a better job of providing the purpose. But, making sure that you're creating an empathetic place where it is okay to show up authentically and it is okay to be vulnerable. Because if we're not empathetic, people are going to shut down, and then we're right back to status quo, and then we're falsifying things, and then we're pretending, and then we're in a way worse place than we were before we even
You're
thought
just
about
faking it.
Exactly.
Yeah, one of my concerns is we run into this a lot, as you know, that sometimes management is on the right path for change, but one of the things they get distracted by is those who speak the loudest, right? There's type A personalities out there who get heard, obviously, doesn't mean they're right, but they get heard over a majority that might be more introverted or quiet about their thoughts, right? So leadership needs to find a way to extract or really find every individual's fear, right? Because there's fears there. That's why they're not speaking up, or personality differences. How have you seen leadership address those problems, right? Because you're not going to get a full idea of what the company feels unless you get each individual involved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where Dr. Ahmed Sidki's contribution to human-centric change management is critical. It is the fourth piece, which is quote unquote build the herd. And it's the idea of no one should ever go the journey alone. I genuinely believe that when leaders are trying to introduce change or trying to start any form of a change journey or change initiative, they need to allow people to build their herds. We're not always going to go as a herd, as a whole organization, because you are going to have the squeaky wheels and you are going to have the loudest voice in the room and you are going to have politics and bureaucracy, right? All of those things. But we should be able to have a small collective. We should have a collective of people. And so encouraging people to reach out to their trusted herd, right? Find your trusted herd, find your people, voice your concerns, and then create the platforms and use the tools that we have available to us. We've got a million tools in the world. There's no excuse not to use any platform needed to allow your people to speak. If you need anonymity, use that. But again, build the herds, start with the people, allow people to have their small herds, then build the herd, then build the herd, then build the herd, right? Keep scaling up the voice, but allow people to start in a small, trusted herd. And
comfortable
then
space, safe
exactly.
space. Yeah.
And then gather that information and continue to roll it up and scale it up. But allow people, that opportunity to say, here's some information. Go take that back to your trusted herd, talk about it, voice it. Because even our highly analytical, more introverted people have trusted people. And so encouraging them to go have that kind of quiet space conversation, I think is so critical. And then gather that information, gather that feedback using whatever tools and platforms you need to be able to accomplish that.
What are a few early signs that leaders can look for to indicate that the change effort is gaining traction versus just not surface level compliance?
I would say number one is when people are visibly and or verbally uncomfortable, persevere, power through. That is not a stopping point. That is not a uh-oh. That is not a yikes, we're going in the wrong way. It means change is happening. If people are getting tingly and people are starting to get red in the face and emails are getting a little more bold than they were a week or a month ago, that is demonstration that people are on the path to change. Because it is not comfortable. It is rarely comfortable for people.
Yeah.
And so number one, if you start to notice discomfort, persevere. It is working. Keep going.
Yeah.
And the other thing is within human-centric change management, we're always shaping the path, which I kind of translate to, I personally don't like snakes and I don't like spiders. If I were ever asked to walk a path lined with snakes and spiders, you better believe it doesn't matter what's at the end of that road, you're not going to get me to walk it. And so leaders need to be looking for where are the snakes, where are the spiders. We need to be sweeping them away to make sure that momentum is moving forward. So the next chance is to say, okay, it looks like we're accelerating. People are getting a little uncomfortable. Now let's check the path. let's check the path of change. Do we need to be making, do we need to sweep the path, right? Do we have snakes and spiders?
Yeah.
Do we have any other hurdles? Does the road fall out, right?
Yeah.
Be repairing and be preparing, always shaping the path to keep that momentum going. And then also find your people who love change. Every organization at least has one.
Look for that one person.
More.
Yeah.
But find the people who want to be the encouragers, who want to be the motivators, who want to be the facilitators, who want to be the cheer team and the cheer squad. Find those people and empower them to lift your people up, to keep that momentum going. Because again, change is infectious. When you start to see it happen, all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, maybe I want to do that. Maybe I want to try that. And so making sure that you do have some servant leaders or actual leaders kind of paving the way, helping to clear the path, and keeping that motivation and energy high.
Elisabeth, have you found any situations where, yes, change has started, but they leveraged it the wrong way, or they were going down the wrong path, and you had to chiropractic adjustment, if you will, right? You had to readjust. So you know what? This is good in the sense that, yes, you guys are starting to address things, but this isn't the change we were looking for, or this is going to lead to something darker.
Yeah, I have a client that I've been working with actively for the last year who had a phenomenal leadership team who saw a problem that needed to be fixed. And each leader took it upon themselves to shape their own change initiative and their own change plan to address the problem. And they did it in silos. And ultimately, what happened is within this organization, 32 different changes were implemented simultaneously. And so if you went and spoke with anyone within the organization, they couldn't remember the difference between change 3 and change 17, let alone change 32. And they were like, wait, what's the difference? Like who, what, where, when, why? Like, wait, do I do this? Do I not do this? Wait, what's this? Wait, what's this new thing? Wait, is it a new tool? It's a new process. Wait, we're hiring someone. Wait, no, we're firing someone. Like it.
It's like contradicting itself. Yeah.
Chaos. And
so was the cure worse than the actual original
yes.
infection?
Yeah, and it wasn't a cure, right?
It was a poison pill.
It was
chaos.
Just exactly,
Pure chaos.
Exactly. And so it took a pause for the cause, as my colleague says, to get leadership back in the room together to say a leadership team is still a team. You're not intended to be individual contributors. You're meant to be collaborators, and each one of you brings your perspective and your expertise. But we should still, again, build the herd. The first herd should be the leadership team. We have to have the same why. We have to have the same path. We have to have the same direction. Like, we can't be sending elephants in 1,000 different directions, as Jonathan Haidt would say. That's also not helpful or effective or impactful change. And so making sure that when leadership says we're going to make a change, they understand the purpose collectively. They have a collective direction that they've come to consensus on, so that you don't send people in 32 different directions and just say, I wish you the best. Complete some of it or all of it or none of it. Like, it just, people need clarity. People deserve specificity. We can still have creative and critical thinking, but we shouldn't expect people to go in 32 different directions and get it right.
No, absolutely. Elisabeth, let me ask you this. So one of the concepts that I love, and we use it in something called design thinking, as you know, right? What you call human-centered design, is this co-creation. In your world, the co-creation is you're trying to bring people, from all sorts of life within the company, right? And it's not what type of person, it's not leadership dictating, it's really co-creating the solution, this change with the people, boots on the ground, if you will, right? How do you envision it, or how have you seen it work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost is making sure that there is a forum or a platform to announce the need for change and then receive feedback. Feedback is a gift. It's a treasure that should be sought after. And it's important to hear dynamic perspectives. even if we have a leadership team that has come to consensus on a change initiative, we still want to hear from the people that are going to be impacted and involved, because they probably see something from a different direction or angle.
Yeah.
I always coach people, when we think about perspective, it's like putting our hand in front of us. And when I look at my hand, I see one side, but when you look at my hand, you see the other. And they're not identical. I mean, it's still the same hand, but there are some variances in perspective. Welcoming your people to share that perspective so that you can turn the hand, make sure that you haven't missed something, I think is so critical in co-creation from a change perspective, because then I get to be bought in, because now it's not just a change initiative being put on me, it's a change initiative I feel like I got to collaborate and be a
You have
part
ownership. Yeah, you have
Exactly.
ownership, and you feel good about it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's one of those concepts that people forget. Again, going back to people make up a business, or whatever that is you're trying to do. If you're trying to win a race like a 4x4 relay, you're a team, right? If any of you are off, then the whole thing's going to be off, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And so you come from the agile world, Elizabeth, correct? You have a strong background. So this whole thing about iterative change, right? And it's really important, again, for design thinking, that you don't try to hit a home run right off the bat. How do you see that? Again, sometimes I see leadership says, go do this. It's a year down the road. Let's take a pulse a year down. And they're like, we didn't see the changes we were hoping for.
Yeah.
How do you see this process of iterative change?
Yeah, I mean, brass tacks. 365 days is expensive. If you put a dollar amount to a day in 365 days in the business world, days are expensive. You could spend 365 days heading in the wrong direction, or you could spend 30 days going in the wrong direction. One allows you to avoid a substantial sunk cost.
Absolutely.
The other puts you in a crisis. And so brass tacks of iterative change is organizations cannot afford to look at change in anything other than incremental kind of time values, if you will, of every 30, 60, 90 days, we need to be checking, adjusting, evolving, learning, pivoting. Because if we wait 365 days, that cost is substantial. If we could have learned in the first 30, 60, 90 days that we needed to pivot or make adjustments or get different people involved, right? Whatever the reason might be, better to learn it quickly when expense is low versus just saying, a year from now, I'll check in and we'll see how that change initiative went. That you can't afford. The market is too competitive. The market is too volatile. You cannot afford to lose that amount of days without incrementally and iteratively making adjustments.
And the real thing, Elizabeth, at the end of the day, you wait a year and things don't work out. The leadership has said, we're not going to try something else. They're going to start becoming gun shy, as you know, and as they should, right? Because they just sunk cost, right? I mean, the other thing is, at least in the world we work in, it's not always manufacturing, but think of it. You're producing a product, whatever that service or physical product, and you're just pumping out product. And you're not getting any feedback and you're not taking a pulse to see what the quality is. Well, guess what? You just keep pumping out the same, maybe not as highly qualified product out the door. And before you know, you got all these recalls. We know there's recalls out in the market. I think there's a vehicle recall right now out there, right? So it's really important to understand those small wins, right? Get those small wins. It's okay. You're going to get there. Smaller bites, right?
Fail fast. That's what you want to do. Fail fast.
Fail fast. That's a perfectly good concept from the computer science world, right? When they develop software, failing fast is, if we got to find out something's going to go bad, let's find out now. We don't want it to go bad, but let's find out now if it has to go bad, right? Because now we're not adding all this cost to the process, or development cost, right? Absolutely, Liz. Good one.
Now, we've talked about leadership and leadership positions around all this. How can someone integrate more human-centric practices in their current role if they're not in that leadership role?
So I'm a firm believer that each one of us is actually a leader, because bare minimum, we have to lead ourselves. We have to get ourselves out of bed. We got to get ourselves to show up. We got to find our motivation. We got to reach and strive for that growth mindset. So even if you're not a people leadership or an executive type of leadership, you're still leading because you're leading yourself. And when you show up in a certain way, people are watching. People are always watching. Again, it's human nature. We can't help but compare and contrast. This is why we're so good at relativity, because we're always comparing and contrasting. Whether we like it or not, it's just built into who we are. And so how we show up is your first opportunity to lead differently and to build your herd and to engage with your herd and to say, hey, everyone, I'm showing up today and I'm going to make this change. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I'm going to make that change. And then say, here's the path I'm going to walk. And here are some of the things I'm concerned about when I walk that path. And does anybody want to join me? Because you shouldn't go through change alone. And I want to invite you to come along with me. You don't have to be a people leader. You don't have to be an executive to show up and invite people on a change journey, on your own personal change journey, or even a change that you want to see within the organization. Just because you don't necessarily have authority doesn't mean you can't show up differently and demonstrate true servant leadership and invite people on the journey with you and show that you can be supportive and show that you can be empathetic, because people are watching, and that information does trickle up to executives. And I don't know many executives who aren't excited to see that type of behavior in their workplace.
Yeah,
Elisabeth,
absolutely.
I'm gonna ask you a very niche scenario,
Yeah.
and maybe you don't have this experience, right? It's not for everyone, and if we have to cut it out, we will. But here's the question, right? So
Yeah.
there's a specific scenario where change is rather quick and shocking. Let's talk about mergers and acquisitions, right?
Yes.
When one company buys another company or is being bought, that is one of those situations where change is, we know it's not immediate, but it seems by the two companies are involved that it has to be immediate, because we know what happens when two companies merge or one acquires another one. Do you have any experience or any examples on how to get one company on the path of good change, right? We know that happens the other way around where it's not, but you can see where this could be a really critical situation to get, two ships going in the same direction is not, especially the big companies. We've seen some major mergers recently. So
Yeah. And it's, a merger literally is two ships coming side by side and then becoming one. And if you're being asked to get on the ship that you didn't originally join,
yeah,
there could be a discrepancy in mission, vision, and values. And you might be like,
Yeah.
whoa, 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 whoa. It's one thing if you want to roll up next to me. It's another if you want me to hop on that ship, because I
And
don't
then
know what your
change.
true north is. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. I will say from a personal perspective, I did go through, I'm going to call it a failed merger and acquisition, because there was no purpose. There was no understanding. People didn't understand why it was happening. And I left that organization because I didn't understand why an organization that looked nothing like us, that would never embrace our culture, wanted to buy us. It made no sense to me. I thought this just makes no sense. And there was never purpose given. There was never clarity given. There was no path, let alone it was like being in a jungle full of snakes and spiders. Like there wasn't even a path to find. It was just, here you are in the jungle with all these terrifying things. And to me, that was ultimate failure, because people were just expected to be like, congratulations, you
Yeah.
used to work for this company, now you work for that company.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you agree with their mission, vision, and values or their structure or their processes, just get on board. And it's like, no, thank you. I'm not here for
Then
that.
they wonder why it fails, right?
Exactly.
It just can't
Exactly.
sustain.
And there probably was a really good reason for it. And there probably was a path for us to follow. But direction and clarity and a path was never provided. And it was too scary and it was too unknown and too frightening. And I personally jumped ship.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or otherwise.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, that
Now,
happens a
probably
lot,
I am,
unfortunately.
yeah. Now I am working with a client right now that is going through merger and acquisition. And I will say I use my personal story with my clients all the time to say people on both sides are going to have a fear factor.
Yeah,
Are you taking that into
absolutely.
consideration? Are they being replaced? Right? Is that why we're acquiring someone? Is like you have to start to ask yourself, if you were the one going through this change experience, what would you want to know? What would you need to know? We're all working for a reason, and it's usually because of our personal life. We've got things we're taking care of. We got bills to pay. We got family to provide for. You don't want to leave people in uncertainty. And so providing clarity, helping them understand the benefits. What's your value proposition? Why are we taking our organization through this? And then as the people who are coming on board, get them excited about your culture, get them excited about your mission, vision, and values, get them excited about new opportunities and things that might not have been available to them before, but expose your culture. Make sure that they know what they're signing up for, because mergers and acquisitions done in black boxes is what loses people. And then you have to ask yourself, why'd you do it in the first place? But I always say be highly transparent, get people excited about the opportunity ahead of them, share your value proposition, and welcome people into your culture. It should be an experience. I always say it should feel like a cruise ship that's very inviting and welcoming. Like it should feel like, welcome to our ship, and here's your champagne, and let me show you to the deck and look at the view. And it should feel very inviting. It shouldn't be like, here's your new job title.
Here's the Titanic. Come on board.
We're sinking. We're taking on water. Just don't go downstairs.
Yeah, don't look at that iceberg in the distance.
Exactly.
You want it to be the Love Boat, right, Elizabeth? Another old reference, the Love Boat. I know.
Yes.
I know. I'm aging myself. Elizabeth,
I love it. I'm here for
it. I assume that when you're doing the buying in those situations, you have better control, right? That you have an opportunity to really bring in that other company into your culture. When it's the other way around, there should still be leadership on the company that's being bought. Say, you know what? We need to really advocate for the people, right? If you want this transition to work well, right? To be that benefit that you're looking for. That's why you're purchasing emerging, the language, right? So there is an opportunity.
It should have felt like a courtship, Did they meet this criteria? Did we have these conversations? Did we talk about our culture? Did we care about the values that are important to us? Did we talk about non-negotiables? But helping people understand that we went through a proper courtship. We didn't just say, well, we reached into the barrel and here's what we found. It should feel like thought went into it, and that it wasn't just to make people money, because I think that is what an awful lot of employees think, is when you go through mergers and acquisitions on either side, it's to make people money. I'm not saying that's not the case, but there is more to it, and leaders have to be willing to say, I did my due diligence. I treated it like a courtship. I asked these inquisitive questions. I came from a place of curious. Here's what I've learned. I don't know everything. Once we get on that ship, I don't know what every room looks like. I don't know what every experience and adventure looks like, but I at least have a lay of the land, and let me share that with you.
Yeah. I assume that a lot of family-owned mom and pops, when they're ready to sell because of legacy or just aging out, the people who still work in that company are very fearful of being bought by another company, right? That must happen a lot. And those are probably worse than corporate mergers, because at least from a corporation, you expect it every couple of years or something's about to happen. But when it's a mom and pop place, right, that's been around for 40 years and they just don't feel, right, they felt part of the family atmosphere. Now they're being bought by something bigger. I assume that's the biggest transition in the emotional, not that they can't do their job or whatever the reason they're being bought, but it's that, how do we continue on after we're no longer a family, right?
Yeah, and some of it is, I talk about this in the book. Some of it is we do need to go through grief. Sometimes when we go on a change journey, we are going to grieve some of our losses, and that's why the herd is so important. Don't go through change alone, because you might need to grieve some things that you absolutely loved that aren't going to be there anymore. And then you have to ask yourself, can I grieve the loss of this and persevere? Can I continue on? Or is this grief substantial enough that I need to leave and try to find what I've lost elsewhere?
Right.
And people are going to make those choices. But they also need to be allowed the space to grieve what is lost. You can't just be like, oh, you were in a mom and pop environment. It felt like a family, and it's not going to feel like that anymore.
We're not a family here.
Yeah. It's Monday, and where are you? Right? Like you have to create the breathing space for people to feel what they are going to feel.
I'm starting to feel like that with Liz. She's starting to treat me that way. So just so you know, I'm starting to lose a little.
Marco's going to feel his feelings.
I'm just going to let it out. It's like a counseling session.
It's fine. Oh. This is safe space. It's safe space.
Yeah. Is it? No one's hearing. No one's listening to this, right?
It's just us three. We're good.
Just sit on the lounge chair and just let it out, right? Elisabeth, is there anything about the book that you really, really want to drive home? If there's anything else with, that you think might get lost in the message, or, because people grip onto different things, but you personally, you wrote it for a purpose, right? Is there one thing or a couple of things that you really want people to just embrace or absorb?
Yeah, number one is never expect to go through change alone. If you are feeling lonely in change, something's not right. You should not have to go through change alone. And so if a herd hasn't been provided for you, build your herd. I think that is hands down number one. Don't expect that it's normal to be asked to go through change alone. It is not meant to be isolation. It is not meant to be siloed. It is meant to be collaborative, and you shouldn't go it alone, personal or professional. Don't go change alone. And then the other big thing that I think gets missed, but it's so funny, it gets missed, but I get asked about it all the time, is actually the cover. So I get asked all the time, why isn't the tape real? Like, why can't I rip it off? Because I actually don't think people do change. People don't change, and I want to rip the tape off. No, it's not real. I'm sorry, but the publisher is not going to take the time to put a real piece of tape on every single book.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
But it is painter's tape intentionally, because just because I change today doesn't mean I'm going to change tomorrow. The tape falls off, and sometimes you're going to be open to change and you're going to be willing to change, and other times the tape is falling off. You have to actively put the painter's tape up.
Yep.
And that's hard. That is so hard for people. When I was designing the cover and the title of the book, I reached out to my community and my network, and I said, when I talk about change, what's your immediate response? 80% of people that I polled said people don't change. And that's why the title is what it is, because that's perception. Perception is people don't change. Yeah. And it's because it is an active participation. The tape does fall off. Again, metaphorically, not physically.
I love that, though. I really do love that.
That's awesome.
But you have to put the tape up. You have to say, I'm going to show up and change. I'm going to be one of those people who does change. Otherwise, you are a not changer. And so the tape is very symbolic, and I think people overlook it, but it was very intentional.
Elisabeth, I did notice that you have more tags on your book than you have pages. There's probably a couple of thousand tags. You just doubled the weight of the book.
She's got a thought on every page. She wrote it.
So it's so funny. So actually, I've got 3 books here with me. Again, this is the Heath brothers and Jonathan Haidt. Again, I just don't have Ahmed Sidki on my desk, but like this is a lot of pages to try to help my clients understand human-centric change management.
Yeah.
So I tried to get it to book. This, like
Elisabeth, I recognize the switch. I recognize the switch book just by the cover. On the side, right?
Yes.
Is that switch? Oh, I know.
Yeah.
It is.
I caught that.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
I don't think we all intentionally meant to have like blue books. Mine's slightly purple, but it's kind of funny. But like you look at like this is a lot of pages. This is a lot less pages. But you can see from my markers, based on what I'm talking about with my clients, there's still like I'm still saying, even though this is less than 200 pages, for some of my clients, there's 10. Like if you just read 10 pages, read these 10. So that's why that even though I trimmed it down, there's still, for some of my clients, I'm like, just read one page. Read one page, you're going to be fine.
Elizabeth, is there an audiobook version of you reading it by like a fire and with a pipe in your hand and not that kind of
I
read?
should not admit this on a podcast, but I feel like, again, this is safe space. I feel like I'm with my people.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
This is
bring
my
it on, bring
herd.
it on.
Yes,
Okay,
we're your
I got you.
herd.
I hate the sound of my voice.
I think
And
everyone does, though.
when I was asked to do the audiobook, I didn't say hell no. Like I just
She said, "How to that?" No.
Tell
I
to the
just
no.
said, let's find a professional who loves reading books. Let's not have the person who can't even stand the sound of their own voice read the book. So yes, there is an audiobook. A fabulous gentleman by the name of Stephen George read it and did it justice.
Oh, that's awesome.
But no,
That's
it is
awesome.
not me reading the book, on a fireside chat. I spared everyone that experience, and instead, I believe Stephen did read by a fireplace.
I'm sure
That's
Steven's
perfect.
not from Boston. I'm pretty sure,
He's
it's
got
like reading
a little bit of a
Shakespeare.
Southern accent, but no Boston
Okay.
accent.
Yeah.
Thank God.
So the book comes out June 3rd. Where can everyone go purchase it?
Yeah.
Anywhere and everywhere. So if Amazon is your go-to spot, you can go to Amazon. You can go to Barnes and Noble. If you're in Colorado, it'll actually be at a couple of our local bookshops. Tattered Cover is our big one. But yeah, you can find it just about anywhere. And the ebook and the hardback and the audiobook will all go live June 3rd. So you can
That's
go
awesome.
to Audible, you can go to iTunes, you can go to, I think, just about anywhere.
Elizabeth,
to
will
get
you be
whatever
doing
version you like.
a book tour? Because I know you consult with a lot of companies. Is part of your contract? Do you have to go to a couple of different states? And
Yes. So I'll be starting here in Colorado and then heading to Arizona.
what state
and
was
then
that?
Texas.
What state was that?
Colorado.
Rado.
I'm just teasing you.
Not to
Go
be
ahead.
confused with Colorado.
Yeah, wow, nice.
I don't know where that pretentious state is.
Are you headed to Arizona, you said?
Yeah, Arizona and Texas, and then from there,
Nice.
TBD right now.
That's
Well,
fantastic.
if you come to the Northeast, maybe if you hit Dallas, you said Texas, maybe
Yeah.
Yeah,
maybe
let me
we
know.
can-
But
Yeah,
we can
absolutely.
do an on-air thing, right?
yeah, that will be perfect. Well,
Part
the
two.
name of the book is People Do Change. It will be everywhere June 3rd. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today. This was fantastic.
Thank you. This
Thank
was
you,
such a
Elizabeth.
joy
That
and
was
a pleasure.
great.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.